The night wore a shroud of bruised plum and charcoal, the kind that promised more than just rain. Ilara watched it gather beyond the tall arched window, a silent, dramatic overture to the private viewing within. Her fingers, usually nimble and precise in the delicate work of restoration, traced the cool glass, feeling the faint tremor of distant thunder. She was a woman of textures, of histories whispered through warp and weft. And tonight, the air itself felt heavy with untold stories, woven with the threads of old wood, aged leather, and the hushed murmurs of the privileged few. She was here at the invitation of Mrs. Allister, a formidable matriarch with a penchant for collecting both antique textiles and promising young talents. Ilara, with her quiet dedication and almost reverent touch, fell into the latter category. Her current project, a set of crumbling Jacobean tapestries, had secured her access to this exclusive world, a world of hushed wealth and art that breathed with forgotten lives. The room she stood in was the main salon of Blackwood Manor, a place steeped in generations of a family's fortunes and secrets. Crimson damask walls, heavy with the patina of time, absorbed the light from a dozen flickering candles, casting long, dancing shadows that played across the faces of the guests. The scent of beeswax, old books, and a faint, lingering aroma of pipe tobacco mingled in the air, a heady, comforting perfume to Ilara. She wore a dress of deep, forest green silk, cut simply, falling in soft folds that brushed her ankles. It was a subtle rebellion against the more ostentatious displays of some of the other women, a quiet statement of her own connection to natural beauty. A string quartet played something languid and melancholic in the adjacent drawing room, their notes drifting like smoke through the open archways. Ilara found herself drawn to a display case near the back, showcasing a collection of ancient silk fragments, each piece a ghost of its former glory. Her fingers itched to touch them, to feel the fragile resilience of threads that had outlasted centuries. She imagined the hands that had spun them, the lives they had adorned. It was a deeply sensual experience for her, connecting to the past through the tactile. As she leaned closer, captivated by the intricate embroidery of a piece of faded Byzantine purple, a voice, deep and resonant, spoke softly beside her. "They speak to you, don't they?" Ilara started, a blush rising to her cheeks. She hadn't heard anyone approach. Turning, she found herself gazing up into eyes the color of warm amber, set in a face that was both sharply defined and elegantly shadowed. The man was tall, with dark, slightly disheveled hair that suggested a recent run of fingers through it. His tailored suit, the color of midnight, hung on him with an ease that spoke of custom craftsmanship, not mere expense. There was a quiet intensity about him, a stillness that drew the eye and held it. "Yes," she managed, her voice a little breathy. "They do. Each thread holds a memory, a story." He offered a faint, slow smile, a curve of lips that was both polite and profoundly intimate, a language only a few can truly understand. His gaze lingered on her, not in an intrusive way, but as if he were truly only seeing her, assessing the depth of her passion. "You have the touch of someone who understands the soul of fabric." "I'm Ilara Vance," she introduced herself, extending a hand. Her palm felt small, and suddenly overly aware of itself in his grasp. His hand was warm, firm, and surprisingly soft. "Julian Thorne," he replied, his voice a low rumble that resonated somewhere deep within her. He held her hand for a beat longer than strictly necessary, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles before he released her. The ghost of his touch lingered, a subtle warmth that prickled her skin. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thorne," Ilara said, retrieving her hand. She felt an unfamiliar fluttering in her chest, a nervous energy that was both exhilarating and slightly disorienting. "Are you the owner of Blackwood Manor?" He inclined his head. "One of its temporary custodians, yes. My family has held it for generations." His gaze swept around the room, a possessive, yet also slightly weary, affection in his eyes. "And you, Miss Vance? Mrs. Allister spoke of your remarkable work." "They are," Ilara agreed, grateful for the familiar ground. "But immensely rewarding, to bring something so fragile back to life, to stabilize its beauty." She trailed off, realizing she was perhaps waxing too poetic for a casual conversation. Julian chuckled, a soft, rich sound that seemed to chase away some of the room's formal chill. "No, please, continue. I find your passion refreshing. Most people see only the decay, not the enduring spirit." He gestured towards the collection of fragments. "These, for instance. 1,000 years old, some of them. Imagine the hands that wove them, the stories they witnessed." He moved a fraction closer, his shoulder almost brushing hers. Elara could smell a faint, intriguing scent, sandalwood, and something else, something clean and musky, utterly masculine. It was intoxicating. She found herself breathing a little more shallowly, acutely aware of his proximity. "I do imagine," she confessed, her voice softer than she intended. "I try to trace their journeys. From silkworm to loom, from merchant's caravan to noble's chamber. Each fold, each faded dye, tells a part of that story." She pointed to a small, intricate piece of embroidery, a stylized bird with wings of gold thread, barely clinging to the aged silk. "This one, I believe, was part of a royal tunic. From the Palatine treasury, perhaps. The technique is exquisite, almost impossibly fine." Julian leaned in, his dark head close to hers. "You have an eye for detail, Miss Vance, and a spirit that connects with the past in a way few others can." His voice was a low murmur for her ears alone. "Tell me, what is the most beautiful fabric you've ever touched?" The question hung in the air, intimate and unexpected. Elara paused, searching for the right words. "Velvet," she said, without hesitation. "True, antique silk velvet. The kind that feels like liquid night, that changes color with the light, that holds warmth and memory. It has a depth, a richness that other fabrics only aspire to." As she spoke, her gaze met his. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, held hers, a silent current passing between them. There was a spark, a recognition, as if they had just shared a secret language. He looked at her as if she were the most fascinating woman in the room, and for a moment, the chattering guests, the distant music, the very walls of Blackwood Manor faded into a hazy background. "Velvet," he repeated, the word rolling off his tongue like a caress. "I understand completely." He straightened slowly, his gaze still locked with hers, and then with a subtle shift he gestured towards an archway. "There's a quieter room just beyond the library. It holds a particular piece of velvet. Perhaps you'd care to see it." The invitation was softly spoken, almost a suggestion, but it felt like a summons. Elara's heart gave a little leap. The storm outside had begun in earnest, a low rumble of thunder followed by the sudden, insistent patter of rain against the windows. It felt like the perfect excuse to retreat to a more secluded space. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Thorne," she replied, a shy smile gracing her lip. He led the way, his stride unhurried, yet purposeful. Elara followed, acutely aware of the elegant breadth of his back, the way his dark hair curled just above his collar. They moved through the periphery of the gathering, past clusters of guests engaged in polite conversation, their voices seeming to recede as Elara focused solely on the man in front of her. They passed through a grand wood-paneled library, its shelves crammed with ancient tomes, the air thick with the scent of leather and paper. Julian paused at a discreet, almost hidden door at the far end. He pushed it open to reveal a smaller room, dimly lit by a single ornate table lamp. It was a study, perhaps, or a private sitting room. The first thing Elara noticed was the overwhelming sense of quiet. It was a haven from the polite din of the party. The second thing was the scent, not just the pervasive old house smell, but something richer, deeper, like old wood, and a faint sweet spice. And then her eyes landed on it. Dominating one wall was a vast floor-to-ceiling tapestry, or rather, a monumental curtain of velvet. It was a deep, almost inky sapphire, so dark it absorbed the meager light, yet paradoxically glowed with an inner luminescence. The fabric was thick, dense, with a pile so deep it seemed to invite you to sink your hands into it. It wasn't merely a curtain, it was a presence, a statement. "This is magnificent," Elara breathed, stepping further into the room. She approached it slowly, reverently, like a pilgrim approaching a sacred shrine. The velvet seemed to hum with an ancient energy. I've never seen anything quite like it. The depth of color. Julian stood a few paces behind her, watching her. It's Genoese, he explained, his voice hushed, as if not to disturb the fabric's slumber. From the late 17th century. Woven on a draw loom, each loop painstakingly cut by hand. It was meant for a ducal palace, but somehow found its way here centuries ago. Ilara reached out a hand, hesitating just inches from the surface. Her fingers tingled with anticipation. "May I?" she asked, turning to him, her eyes wide with a childlike wonder. He nodded, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Of course. It longs to be touched." Her fingers finally made contact. The sensation was immediate and profound. It wasn't merely soft, it was galloping. The pile was incredibly dense, yielding with a luxurious resistance, then springing back with a silent sigh. It felt cool, then warmed under her touch, like a living skin. She ran her palms slowly down the length, feeling the subtle shifts in texture, the way the nap caught the light, transforming the deep blue into shades of charcoal, indigo, and even a fleeting glimpse of iridescent violet. "It truly is liquid night," she murmured, lost in the sensory experience. "It feels like a dream made manifest." Julian stepped closer until he was standing directly behind her. She could feel the warmth of his body, the subtle hum of his presence. The room, already small, seemed to shrink further, enclosing them in a bubble of shared awe. His breath stirred the fine hairs at her nape as he leaned in, his voice a whisper against her ear. "It holds secrets, I think," he said, his words sending a shiver down her spine. Secrets of the hands that wove it, the eyes that admired it, the lives that unfolded in its shadow. Ilara nodded, her eyes still fixed on the velvet. "And it holds the imprint of those who have touched it, those who have loved it." She let her fingers trail to the very bottom, where the velvet met the floor, and then slowly drew her hand back up, reveling in the tactile journey. As her hand ascended, Julian's own hand rose slowly, deliberately. His fingers brushed against hers, a whisper of contact, as he reached for the velvet, mirroring her touch. His palm rested just inches from hers, pressing into the luxurious fabric. The heat from his hand seemed to radiate, seeping into her own skin, even without direct contact. It was an electric awareness, a silent communication that transcended words. They stood like that for a long moment, two figures silhouetted against the dark velvet, their hands almost touching, sharing the intimate experience of the ancient fabric. The storm outside raged with renewed vigor, the wind howling around the eaves of Blackwood Manor, rattling a loose pane somewhere nearby. But within the small room, there was only the hushed silence, the deep blue of the velvet, and the charged atmosphere between them. Ilara felt an unfamiliar warmth bloom in her chest, spreading through her veins. It wasn't just the thrill of discovering an extraordinary textile. It was the man beside her, his quiet intensity, the way he seemed to understand her on a level few others ever had. His presence was both calming and exhilarating, a paradox that left her slightly breathless. Slowly, carefully, Julian shifted his weight. His hand, still pressed against the velvet, moved imperceptibly closer to hers. His thumb brushed the back of her hand, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through her. Her breath hitched. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken desires. He turned his head, his amber eyes seeking hers in the dim light. They were pools of liquid gold, reflecting the faint glow of the lamp. The look in them was deep, searching, full of a quiet hunger that mirrored her own burgeoning feelings. "Ilara," he murmured, her name a soft caress on his lips. "You truly are a woman of exquisite touch." His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there for a beat that felt like an eternity. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, profound silence. She felt a delicious anticipation, a yearning she hadn't known she possessed, rise within her. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, framed by the opulent, silent witness of the velvet. The storm outside reached a crescendo, a wild, untamed symphony. But inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, slow and inevitable. She waited, breath held, for his next move, for the quiet electricity that pulsed between them to finally ignite. The storm outside, a tempest of wind and rain, rattled the windows of the small study, providing a dramatic counterpoint to the quiet intensity blooming between them. Ilara's gaze, caught in the deep pools of Julian's eyes, felt drawn into a current she could neither resist nor fully comprehend. The warmth of his hand, still pressed near hers on the velvet, was a tangible connection, a spark leaping across the narrow divide of skin and fabric. "Julian," she whispered, the name a soft exhalation of breath, barely audible above the wind's mournful cry. She found herself leaning imperceptibly towards him, her body responding to an instinct older and deeper than conscious thought. The scent of him, sandalwood and that unique, earthy musk, filled her senses, intoxicating and utterly compelling. His hand, which had been resting on the velvet, now shifted, his fingers slowly, deliberately, tracing a path along the nap of the fabric, moving closer to her own. His thumb brushed the very edge of her palm, a fleeting, tender contact that sent a shiver through her, igniting a trail of goosebumps along her arms. "There's something about this room," Julian said, his voice a low, intimate murmur, almost a vibration against her ear as he leaned closer still. "It holds a quiet power, like you, Ilara, a quiet power." His words, spoken with such sincerity, settled deep within her, warming her from the inside out. He saw her, truly saw her, not just as a textile restorer, but as a woman with a hidden strength, a quiet passion. It was a revelation and a seduction, all at once. Her gaze flickered from his eyes to his mouth, drawn by the subtle curve of his lips, the promise held within their stillness. She wondered what it would feel like to have them on hers, to taste the faint spice that seemed to cling to him. The thought sent a jolt of delicious anticipation through her, a thrill that was both exhilarating and a little frightening. The silence between them stretched, taut and shimmering, charged with unspoken desires. The only sounds were the raging storm outside and the frantic beat of Ilara's own heart. She felt a profound sense of vulnerability, yet paradoxically, a burgeoning strength. Something new was awakening within her, stirred by this man, by this moment, by the ancient, luxurious velvet that surrounded them. His eyes, still locked with hers, seemed to deepen, the amber glowing with an unspoken question. He was giving her space, allowing her to make the choice, to step forward or retreat. It was a testament to his understanding, his respect, and it only made her more drawn to him. This wasn't a man who would rush or demand. He understood the slow, luxurious unraveling of true intimacy. Ilara found her own hand, as if of its own volition, turning slightly, her fingers splaying open, inviting further contact. The small gesture was monumental, a silent surrender, a silent invitation. A faint smile touched Julian's lips, a slow, knowing curve that sent a fresh wave of warmth through her. He understood. His fingers, warm and firm, now gently intertwined with hers, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin between her thumb and forefinger. It was a touch that was both tender and possessive, a silent claim. The contact was electric, a sudden, powerful current that flowed from his hand to hers, up her arm, and spread through her entire body. She felt a tingling sensation deep within her core, a delicious ache that promised something profound. "The velvet," he murmured, his voice a silken thread, "has witnessed many such moments, I imagine. Encounters born of storm and shadow, of shared beauty and unspoken longing." His thumb continued its slow, mesmerizing caress, sending shivers through her. Ilara could only nod, her throat tight with emotion. She was utterly captivated, lost in the sensation of his touch, the depth of his gaze. The storm outside intensified, a sudden flash of lightning illuminating the room for a split second, casting their entwined hands in stark relief against the dark velvet. In that brief flash, she saw the intensity in his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hand, mirroring her own. He slowly, gently, tugged her hand, drawing her a fraction closer. The proximity was intoxicating, the scent of him more potent, the warmth of his body radiating against hers. Her silk dress rustled softly as she moved, a whisper of sound in the charged silence. "You have a unique way of seeing the world, Alara," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of appreciating the beauty in the forgotten, the stories in the unspoken." His gaze dropped again to her lips, lingering there, a silent question. "And I suspect there are many stories yet to be told within you." Her breath hitched again, a silent gasp. He was delving deeper than anyone ever had, seeing beyond the quiet, reserved exterior she presented to the world. He was seeing the yearning, the passion, the intricate tapestry of her soul. Her eyes fluttered closed for a brief moment, savoring the sensation of his touch, the warmth of his presence. When she opened them again, his face was closer still, his eyes burning with a controlled intensity. The air between them thrummed, thick with unspoken desire. He lifted their joined hands, slowly, deliberately, bringing her fingers to his lips. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her knuckles, his lips warm and soft against her skin. The gesture was tender, reverent, and utterly devastating in its intimacy. It was a promise, a prelude, a slow, exquisite torture. A soft sigh escaped Alara's lips, a sound she hadn't realized she was holding. Her mind reeled, her senses overwhelmed. This was more than just attraction. It was a profound connection, a recognition of kindred spirits drawn together by an invisible thread. Julian's gaze never left hers, even as his lips left her hand. He slowly lowered their joined hands, but did not release her. Instead, he drew her a step closer, until their bodies were almost touching, separated only by the sheer force of the air between them. The velvet curtain behind them seemed to press in, enclosing them in a secret world. "The night is young, Alara," he said, his voice a low, husky whisper that sent shivers of pleasure through her. "And the storm shows no sign of abating. Perhaps we could find a quieter corner still? A place where the stories can truly unfold?" His thumb stroked her knuckles again, a hypnotic rhythm that echoed the beat of her racing heart. The invitation was clear, unspoken, yet utterly compelling. It was an invitation not just to another room, but to a journey, into a deepening intimacy, into a world where the boundaries of touch and desire might blur and dissolve. Alara looked into his eyes, her own reflecting the flickering candlelight, and saw a depth of desire, a gentle intensity that mirrored her own burgeoning feelings. She knew with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul that this was a moment she had been waiting for, a connection that felt destined. The velvet, a silent witness to centuries of human drama, seemed to hum with approval. She took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of him filling her lungs, steadying her. "I think," she said, her voice a little shaky but firm, "I would like that very much, Julian." A slow, utterly captivating smile spread across his face, lighting his eyes with a profound warmth. He tightened his grip on her hand, a silent promise. The storm raged on outside, but within the small, velvet-lined room, a different kind of warmth had begun to bloom, a quiet fire that promised to consume them both. He turned, still holding her hand, and began to lead her deeper into the hushed secrets of Blackwood Manor, and into the unfolding tapestry of their own story. He turned, still holding her hand, and began to lead her deeper into the hushed secrets of Blackwood Manor, and into the unfolding tapestry of their own story. Julian led her through a labyrinth of shadows and light, the manor's ancient timbers groaning softly, in response to the storm's relentless assault. Each step was a whisper against the thick, patterned carpets, a journey deeper into the heart of the house, and she sensed, into the very core of him. The air grew warmer, infused with the scent of old leather, beeswax, and a faint, indefinable aroma that was uniquely Blackwood Manor, a blend of history, secrets, and perhaps latent magic. He guided her past vast ancestral portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them, past towering bookshelves crammed with forgotten tomes, their spines a riot of faded gold and cracked leather. The flickering gaslights, strategically placed, cast dancing shadows that elongated his form, making him seem even more imposing, more mysterious. His hand, still clasped firmly around hers, was a warm anchor in the hushed expanse, a constant reminder of their improbable connection. Finally, he stopped before a heavy oak door, intricately carved with swirling vines and mythical creatures. He pushed it open with a soft creak, revealing a room bathed in the golden glow of a roaring fireplace. This was not a formal drawing room, nor a grand hall, but a more intimate, decidedly masculine study. Walls lined floor to ceiling with books, a massive mahogany desk cluttered with old maps and navigational instruments, and two deep, leather armchairs facing the hearth. A crystal decanter and two glasses gleamed on a small side table. "I thought you might appreciate a little warmth, and perhaps something to chase away the chill," he said, his voice a low rumble that resonated in the quiet room. He released her hand, but only to gently take her soaked cloak from her shoulders. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin of her nape as he unfastened the clasp, sending a shiver, not of cold, but of exquisite anticipation, down her spine. The heavy fabric, sodden and dripping, fell away, revealing the simple, elegant lines of her dress beneath. "Thank you, Julian," she murmured, turning to face him. The firelight caught the planes of his face, accentuating the strong line of his jaw, the slight stubble that shadowed it, the intense depth of his eyes. He looked at once rugged and refined, a man perfectly at home in this ancient, powerful space. He hung her cloak on a stand near the door, then gestured towards one of the armchairs. "Please, make yourself comfortable." She sank into the plush leather, the warmth of the fire immediately embracing her. The storm's fury, though still audible, felt distant, muffled by the thick walls and the comforting crackle of the flames. Julian moved to the side table, pouring a rich amber liquid into the crystal glasses. The scent of aged brandy drifted across the room. He handed her a glass, their fingers brushing again, a spark igniting in the brief contact. "Armagnac," he informed her. "A particularly fine vintage, I believe. My grandfather's favorite." She took a delicate sip. The spirit was smooth, warm, and subtly sweet, spreading a pleasant heat through her veins. "It's exquisite," she praised, her gaze meeting his over the rim of the glass. "Everything about this place. It feels like stepping into a different time." He settled into the armchair opposite her, stretching out his long legs towards the fire. The flames reflected in his dark eyes, making them glint with an enigmatic light. "It is in many ways," he agreed. "Blackwood Manor holds its secrets close. Some, I'm still discovering myself." "And what brought you back to discover them, Julian?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended, laced with a curiosity she couldn't suppress. "You were gone for so long." The words hung in the air, a delicate thread connecting their past. He paused, swirling the brandy in his glass, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "Life," he said eventually, his tone laced with a hint of weariness she hadn't noticed before. "The world outside Blackwood has a way of shaping you, of pulling you in directions you never anticipated. But there comes a point when the call of home, of roots, becomes undeniable. Especially when there are loose ends." He looked at her then, his gaze piercing direct. "And some of those loose ends, it seems, have a name. A beautiful one." A blush warmed her cheeks, mirroring the heat from the brandy. She swallowed, trying to compose herself. "You remember my name then?" she challenged gently, a playful glint in her eyes. A slow smile played on his lips, the kind that made her breath catch. "I remember everything about you from the first moment I saw you," he confessed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The way your hair caught the sunlight, even then. The spark in your eyes. Your fierce independence." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze never leaving hers. "You were always a force, even as a girl." Her heart fluttered, a wild bird trapped in her ribs. To hear him speak of her like this, after all these years, after the chasm of time and silence that had separated them, was both exhilarating and profoundly unnerving. "And you," she began, searching for the right words, "you were always larger than life." The boy from the big house, with the stormy eyes and the quiet intensity. She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "You haven't changed so much, Julian. Still that same intensity." "Perhaps," he conceded, a shadow passing over his features for a moment before it cleared. "Though life carves its own lines, doesn't it? Adds a few scars, a few layers of experience." He took another sip of his brandy, his gaze thoughtful. "But some things, I find, remain untouched by time. The feeling of the rain on your face, the scent of the ocean after a storm, and certain connections." The implication hung between them, thick and palpable. The air in the room, already warm, seemed to hum with an unspoken energy. The storm outside had intensified, the wind howling like a banshee, rattling the ancient window panes. But here in the firelit heaven, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of burgeoning desire and rekindled longing. "Tell me," she prompted, leaning forward slightly, her voice barely above a murmur. "What kind of experience? Where did you go? What did you do?" The curiosity was genuine, but beneath it lay a deeper yearning to understand the man he had become, to bridge the gap of all those lost years. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I traveled," he began, his voice taking on a storyteller's cadence. "Saw the world, or at least a good portion of it. Sailed the Mediterranean, trekked through the Andes, worked on archaeological digs in the desert. I sought something. Adventure, purpose. Perhaps even a way to outrun the ghosts of this place." He gestured vaguely around the study. "And in the process, I learned to read the stars, to navigate by the sun, to speak a few more languages than I needed. I learned to build, to repair, to survive, to appreciate the stark beauty of the untamed world." His words painted vivid pictures in her mind, of vast horizons and ancient dust, of a life lived on the edge. She imagined him rugged and tanned, his eyes scanning distant landscapes, a man truly forged by the elements. A thrill went through her, a mixture of admiration and a pang of regret for all the years she hadn't known him. "And yet," she said softly, "you came back." He met her gaze, his expression serious, almost vulnerable. "Yes, there are things you can't outrun. And Blackwood, it's more than just a house, it's a legacy, a responsibility, and in its own way, a keeper of memories." His eyes lingered on her face, some of them very potent. The intensity of his gaze was almost overwhelming. She felt herself drawn into their depths, a vortex of unspoken emotions. The brandy warmed her from within, loosening her inhibitions, making her feel bold. "What kind of memories, Julian?" she whispered, her voice husky. He leaned back in his chair, taking a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. Memories of stolen glances across crowded rooms, of clandestine meetings in the old conservatory, amidst the scent of jasmine and damp earth. Of shared dreams, whispered under a canopy of stars, foolish and hopeful, as only youth can be. His voice was a low murmur, weaving a spell around them. Memories of a girl who made my world feel brighter, even when it was at its darkest. A girl I never quite forgot. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat. He was speaking of them, of their shared past, a past she had cherished, and in her more pragmatic moments, tried to dismiss as youthful fancy. But hearing him articulate it with such raw honesty made it impossibly real, impossibly vibrant. I remember those things too," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I often wondered if I had imagined them, or if they were just echoes of a time that couldn't last." "Nothing lasts if you don't fight for it," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "But some echoes, they resonate for a lifetime. They call you back." He placed his glass carefully on the table, then slowly rose from his armchair. He walked towards the fireplace, his back to her for a moment, then turned, leaning an arm against the mantelpiece. The firelight sculpted his profile, turning him into a bronze statue. "You came to Blackwood tonight for a reason," he continued, his voice a low thrum. "Beyond the storm, beyond the accident. Did you truly believe I wouldn't be here?" She looked up at him, her throat tight. I didn't know what to believe. My parents always spoke of Blackwood as empty, abandoned, a place of shadows." She laughed, a short, self-deprecating sound. "I suppose part of me hoped, foolishly, that a ghost of you might still linger here. A trace of the boy I knew." He pushed himself off the mantelpiece, taking a slow, deliberate step towards her chair. Then, another. And another. Her breath hitched in her throat as he drew closer, his presence expanding, filling the room, filling her senses. The rich scent of him, wood smoke, old paper, a hint of something wild and masculine, enveloped her. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. The flickering firelight danced in his eyes, turning them into pools of molten gold. "And what do you find now that you're here?" he asked, his voice a deep murmur, barely above a whisper. "A ghost? Or something more substantial?" Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, the sheer magnetic force of his presence. Every instinct screamed at her to lean into him, to close the small distance that separated them. I find a man," she managed, her voice trembling slightly. "A man who remembers. A man who makes my heart beat faster just by looking at me." A slow, tender smile touched his lips, transforming his rugged features into something breathtakingly gentle. He reached out a hand, his fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second before they gently cupped her jaw. His touch was warm, firm, exquisitely tender. A jolt, electric and profound, shot through her. "And you," he murmured, his thumb stroking the curve of her cheekbone. "You are even more beautiful than I remembered, more vibrant, more captivating." His eyes dropped to her lips, lingering there for a long, breathless moment. "The years have been kind to you, my dear. Or perhaps you've simply bloomed into the woman you were always meant to be." Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite sensation of his touch, the heady rush of his words. When she opened them, his face was even closer. She could feel his breath warm on her skin, smell the faint, intoxicating aroma of brandy in him. "Julian?" she whispered, her voice a plea, a question, a surrender. "Shh," he breathed, his gaze still locked on her lips. "No more words, not now." Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he lowered his head. Her heart leaped, soared, plummeted. She watched, mesmerized, as his eyes closed, his long lashes brushing his cheekbones. His lips, firm and exquisitely sculpted, met hers. It was a feather-like touch at first, tentative, exploratory, a question rather than a demand. But even that gentle brush sent a shockwave through her entire being. Her own lips parted slightly in invitation, a silent yearning. He responded immediately, the pressure deepening, becoming more confident, more possessive. His mouth was warm, soft, yet firm, tasting of brandy and something uniquely him. She felt herself melt into the kiss, her hands coming up to grip the lapels of his jacket, clinging to him as if to steady herself against the dizzying sensation. The kiss deepened, drawing her further into its intoxicating embrace. His hand, still cupping her jaw, tilted her head slightly, allowing for a more profound connection. She felt the subtle shift in his body, the way he leaned into her, pressing his strong form against her chair. His other hand came to rest on her waist, pulling her closer still, flattening the fabric of her dress against her skin. She kissed him back with an intensity that surprised even herself, all the suppressed longing of years bursting forth in that single profound connection. Her fingers tightened on his jacket, feeling the fine wool beneath her fingertips, the solid warmth of his body. The world outside, the storm, the ancient manner, all faded away, leaving only the exquisite sensation of his lips on hers, the intoxicating taste of him, the rapid beat of her own heart. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their lips to still brush, for their foreheads to touch. His eyes, when they opened, were dark, smoldering, filled with an emotion so potent it stole her breath. "I've dreamt of that for years," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion, a raw vulnerability that utterly disarmed her. Waking and sleeping. She traced the line of his jaw with a trembling finger, her own eyes still hazy with the aftermath of the kiss. "Me too," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "More than I ever dared to admit." He straightened slightly, but still held her close, his hand resting intimately on her waist, his thumbs stroking the soft fabric of her dress. His gaze swept over her face, lingering on her parted lips, the flush on her cheeks. "The storm shows no sign of abating," he observed, his voice a low murmur, though the words were almost an afterthought, a pretext. "You can't possibly leave tonight. Not in this weather. The roads will be treacherous." She knew he wasn't just talking about the storm outside. He was talking about the storm between them, the tempest of rekindled desire that now raged. She looked into his eyes, seeing the question, the unspoken invitation. "No," she agreed, her voice soft. "I suppose not." She didn't want to leave. Not now. Not ever. The thought of stepping back out into the cold, the darkness, the world without him, was suddenly unbearable. He smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips that sent another shiver through her. "Good," he said, his voice imbued with a satisfaction that made her knees weak. "Then allow me to show you to your chambers. Blackwood has many rooms, and some are more inviting than others." He released her, though his eyes never left hers, as if he feared she might vanish if he broke the connection. He offered her his hand again, and she took it, her fingers intertwining with his, a perfect fit. He led her out of the study, leaving the warmth of the fire behind, but carrying with them a new, internal heat that promised to chase away any chill. The ascent up the grand staircase was a journey into a different realm of the manor. The air grew cooler, but the sense of anticipation warmed her from within. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by the sporadic flashes of lightning that illuminated the stained glass windows, revealing fleeting glimpses of intricate patterns and heraldic crests. The creaks and groans of the old house seemed to whisper secrets, ancient tales of love and longing that had unfolded within these very walls. Julian's hand remained a constant, reassuring presence, his thumb occasionally stroking the back of her hand, a small, intimate gesture that spoke volumes. They passed more portraits, their subjects dignified and stern, yet in the flickering light, they seemed to hold a knowing glint in their eyes, as if privy to the unfolding drama below. He stopped at a landing, before a hallway that stretched into deeper gloom. "This wing," he explained, his voice a low murmur, "is less frequently used. Quieter, more private." He led her down the hallway, the only sound their soft footsteps and the distant roar of the storm. The air here was subtly different, carrying the faint scent of lavender and old lace, a softer, gentler aroma than the masculine study downstairs. He stopped before a door of dark, polished wood, simple and elegant. "This was my mother's guest suite," he said, pushing the door open. "It's been kept ready for unexpected visitors." His gaze, as it met hers, was full of unspoken meaning. "Though I doubt any visitor has ever been quite so welcome." She stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. The room was vast, yet undeniably cozy, designed to cocoon its occupant. A massive four-poster bed, draped with heavy velvet curtains, dominated the space. A fire, already laid, crackled merrily in a smaller hearth, casting a warm, inviting glow. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, and the chaise lounge was positioned invitingly by a tall window, through which the rain lashed relentlessly. A delicate scent of roses and old linen filled the air. "It's beautiful, Julian," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine awe. She turned to him, her eyes wide. Truly beautiful. He stood just inside the doorway, leaning against the frame, his arms crossed over his chest, watching her. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of tenderness, longing, and something intensely possessive. "I thought you might find it so," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "It has a certain serenity." She walked further into the room, running a hand over the smooth, cool wood of a dresser, then towards the fireplace, drawn by its warmth. She shivered slightly, a residual chill from the earlier downpour, but also from the burgeoning excitement that coursed through her veins. "You must be tired," he said, his voice softer now, almost a caress. "It's been a long day, and a rather eventful journey." She turned to face him, a small tentative smile playing on her lips. Eventful indeed. Her gaze drifted from his eyes, down to his lips, remembering the exquisite taste of him, the intoxicating warmth of his kiss. The memory sent a fresh wave of heat through her. He seemed to read her thoughts, his own eyes darkening, mirroring her desire. He pushed himself off the doorframe and took a slow step into the room, then another. The distance between them, though still significant in the large room, felt like an impossible chasm. "I'll leave you to get comfortable," he said, his voice a little rougher now, a hint of strain in it. "There are fresh towels in the adjoining bath, and I can have some warm water sent up if you wish." "Julian," she said, her voice barely a whisper, stopping him before he could turn to leave. He stopped, his back to her, then slowly turned. Questioning. She took a hesitant step towards him, then another. Her heart was pounding, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The air crackled with unspoken words, with raw, undeniable attraction. "Don't go," she pleaded, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. "Not yet." His eyes widened slightly, then softened, a profound tenderness replacing the earlier tension. He took a step towards her, closing the remaining distance. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was a powerful embrace in itself. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice a low murmur thick with emotion. "Because if I stay, I won't be able to leave." His gaze was a silent promise, a warning and invitation all at once. She looked up at him, her heart overflowing with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. All her life, she had played it safe, followed the rules, kept her emotions carefully guarded. But now, faced with this man, this force of nature from her past, she felt an undeniable urge to abandon caution, to surrender to the whirlwind of feelings he stirred within her. "I'm sure," she breathed, reaching out a hand, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against the fine wool of his jacket. "Stay." A profound relief washed over his features, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated desire. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. His eyes searched hers, seeking confirmation, finding it. "My sweet," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "you have no idea how long I've waited to hear you say that." He leaned down, slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as his lips, warm and seeking, once again, found hers. This kiss was different from the last. It was deeper, more urgent, laced with a potent blend of tenderness and hunger. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body, leaving no doubt as to his desire. She felt the heat of him, the strength of his muscles, the rapid beat of his heart mirroring her own. Her hands instinctively went around his neck, tangling in the thick hair at his nape, pulling him closer still. Her fingers explored the strong column of his neck, the warmth of his skin. The kiss deepened further, becoming a languid dance of lips and tongues, a symphony of unspoken yearning. He murmured something against her mouth, a low growl she couldn't quite decipher, but the meaning was clear. He wanted her. And she, in turn, wanted him with an intensity that took her breath away. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms, a gasp escaping her lips, but it was quickly swallowed by his kiss. She wrapped her legs around his waist, clinging to him, her body molding perfectly against his. He carried her towards the magnificent four-poster bed, his gaze never leaving hers, his eyes burning with an unquenchable fire. He laid her gently on the soft mattress, the velvet curtains swaying around them like a private sanctuary. He didn't release her immediately, but leaned over her, his weight supported by his arms, his eyes still locked on hers. "Beautiful," he whispered again, his voice raw, his gaze sweeping over her face, her hair fanned out on the pillow, the subtle rise and fall of her chest beneath her dress. So incredibly beautiful. His fingers, surprisingly gentle, reached for the delicate buttons of her dress, starting at her throat. Each button he unfastened was a slow, deliberate act, a tantalizing promise. His gaze never left her face, watching her reaction. Seeing the flush that crept up her neck, the widening of her pupils, the subtle tremor in her breath. The fabric parted, revealing the smooth skin of her collarbone, the gentle swell of her chest. The cool air of the room, contrasted with the warmth of the fire and the heat of his gaze, sent goosebumps prickling over her skin. She shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite anticipation. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to the newly exposed skin of her shoulder, then along her collarbone, leaving a trail of fire in his wake. Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened in his hair, pulling him closer, urging him on. "Julian," she whispered, her voice a ragged plea, her body arching subtly beneath him. He lifted his head, his eyes dark with desire, his breathing ragged. "Patience, my love," he murmured, his lips brushing hers. "Tonight we have all the time in the world." His fingers continued their slow, deliberate work, unfastening the remaining buttons, until the dress lay open, revealing the delicate lace of her chemise beneath. He pushed the fabric gently off her shoulders, letting it fall away, revealing her bare arms, the curve of her shoulders, the delicate line of her décolletage. He paused, his gaze lingering, savoring the sight. The firelight played across her skin, turning it to molten gold. A profound tenderness softened his features, even amidst the burning desire in his eyes. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. "You are perfection," he breathed, his voice barely audible. "Absolute perfection." He leaned down again, this time his lips tracing the curve of her shoulder, then moving lower to the hollow of her throat, sending a delicious shiver through her. He tasted her skin, lingered there, his breath warm and intoxicating. The storm raged outside, a wild symphony of wind and rain, but within the velvet-draped sanctuary of the bed, a different kind of wildness was just beginning to stir. His lips moved lower still, towards the delicate lace of her chemise, promising more, much more. She closed her eyes, utterly lost in the sensations, in the heady promise of the night ahead, in the intoxicating presence of Julian. The tapestry of their story, indeed, was just beginning to unfold. Julian's breath, a warm whisper against the delicate lace, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the chill of the storm. His lips, soft and insistent, traced the floral pattern of the silk, a promise whispered without words. Her fingers, which had been clutching the velvet bedspread, now found purchase in his thick, dark hair, pulling him closer, an unspoken invitation. The rain lashed against the window panes, a wild drumbeat to the burgeoning rhythm of their hearts. He lifted his head, his eyes, dark pools reflecting the low lamplight, met hers. A silent question hung between them, heavy with anticipation. She offered a slight, trembling nod, her breath catching in her throat. His smile, slow and utterly captivating, was her undoing. He reached for the ribbon at her shoulder, his fingers brushing her skin, sending sparks of sensation along her arm. With a gentle tug, the silk loosened, then another, until the chemise, a whisper of cream and lace, began to slide down her shoulders, revealing the curve of her collarbone, the delicate slope of her breast, A sigh escaped her lips, a sound of pure surrender and burgeoning desire. Julian's gaze followed the descent of the fabric, lingering, worshipping. He didn't rush, savoring each moment, each revelation. The camise pulled at her waist, a silken cloud around her hips, leaving her bare to the waist. The air, cool against her warmed skin, was suddenly charged with electricity. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet utterly safe, utterly desired in the crucible of his gaze. He leaned in again, not to kiss her lips, but to press his mouth to the sensitive skin just beneath her ear, sending another wave of shivers through her. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her very core. His hands, warm and strong, found her waist, his thumbs tracing circles on her skin, pulling her gently closer until their bare chests were almost touching. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the steady beat of his heart mirroring her own frantic rhythm. Her own hands, emboldened, reached for the buttons of his shirt, fumbling slightly in her eagerness. Julian chuckled, a rich, deep sound that sent a thrill through her. He covered her hands with his, guiding them, his touch a silent lesson in patience and pleasure. One by one, the pearl buttons yielded, until the crisp linen parted, revealing the smooth, muscled expanse of his chest. She inhaled sharply, a scent of sandalwood and man, uniquely Julian, filling her senses. He shrugged the shirt off, letting it fall to the floor with a soft thud, a counterpoint to the raging storm. Now, only the thin barrier of their undergarments remained. The storm outside seemed to intensify, as if mirroring the tempest building within the room, within them. Julian's eyes, alight with passion, held hers captive. He reached out, his fingers incredibly gentle as they brushed against the peak of her breast, a light, teasing touch that made her arch into his hand. A soft moan escaped her lips, and he captured it with his own, a deep, consuming kiss that left her breathless. Their mouths moved together, a dance of seeking and yielding, tasting and consuming. His tongue delved, exploring, teasing, igniting a fire that spread rapidly through her veins. She met his passion with her own, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer still, wanting to melt into him, to become one with the heat and urgency of their embrace. When he finally broke the kiss, it was only to trail his lips down her jaw, along her throat, to the pulse, beating wildly at its base. "You are exquisite," he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. His hands moved from her waist, sliding upwards, cupping her breasts, his thumbs brushing against their tender tips. A gasp escaped her, a sound of pure pleasure as a delicious ache began to bloom deep within her. She found herself arching against him, instinctively seeking more. He understood, his touch growing more confident, more knowing. With a slow, deliberate movement, he knelt before her on the bed, his dark eyes never leaving hers. He reached for the hem of her chemise, gathering the silk, slowly, sensuously, drawing it upwards, over her hips, over her thighs, until it joined the rest of her clothing, discarded on the floor. She stood before him, bathed in the soft lamplight, completely bare, completely vulnerable, completely hers for the taking. A flush spread across her skin, a mixture of shyness and exhilaration. Julian's gaze was reverent, adoring, making her feel not exposed, but cherished. He rose, pulling her gently down onto the bed, their bodies finally meeting, skin to skin, heat to heat. The soft velvet of the sheets seemed to melt beneath them, a luxurious cradle for their unfolding passion. His body was lean and strong, perfectly sculpted, and the feel of his skin against hers was an electric current, igniting every nerve ending. He settled beside her, his arm curving around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Her leg instinctively hooked over his, their limbs intertwining, a natural tangle of desire. "Tell me," he murmured, his breath a warm caress against her ear, "what it is you desire." Her mind reeled, a delicious chaos of sensations. "You," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Only you." He chuckled softly, a sound of profound satisfaction. His fingers began to trace languid patterns on her back, sending delicious shivers through her. Then his hand moved lower, over the curve of her hip, along her thigh, a tender exploration that left a trail of fire in its wake. He kissed her again, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of longing and promise, a kiss that spoke volumes of the yearning that had simmered between them for so long, finally unleashed. The storm outside raged on, a tempest of wind and rain, but within their velvet haven, a different kind of storm was building, one of exquisite pleasure and burgeoning intimacy. Julian's touch became bolder, his kisses more urgent. He moved above her, supporting himself on his elbows, his eyes dark and intense holding hers. The world outside, the storm, the demands of the day, all faded into insignificance. There was only Julian and her and the undeniable pull that bound them together. He began to move, a slow, hypnotic rhythm, his body pressing against hers, teasing, promising. Each subtle shift of his weight, each brush of skin against skin heightened the exquisite tension. She gasped, her fingers digging into the strong muscles of his shoulders, her body arching to meet his. He leaned down, capturing her gasp with another searing kiss, his tongue mirroring the dance of their bodies. The world narrowed to the feel of his skin, the scent of him, the taste of his mouth, the soft moans that escaped her lips, the whispered words he breathed against her neck. He moved with a tender ferocity, a perfect balance of power and restraint, attuned to her every breath, her every subtle movement. She felt herself unraveling, piece by delicious piece, giving herself over to the intoxicating current that swept them both along. Waves of pleasure began to ripple through her, building steadily, inexorably. She clung to him, her legs wrapping around his waist, pulling him deeper, closer, wanting to be utterly consumed. The rhythm intensified, a primal dance, ancient and new all at once. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat echoing the storm outside. And then, the crescendo. A sudden, blinding surge of sensation, a release so profound it felt as if her very soul was shattering and reforming, brighter, purer, utterly fulfilled. She cried out, Julian's name a broken whisper on her lips, as the waves of pleasure crashed over her, carrying her away to a place of pure, unadulterated bliss. He followed moments later, a guttural groan escaping him as he buried his face in her neck, his body trembling, utterly spent. They lay tangled together, breathless, heartbeats slowly returning to a normal rhythm. The storm outside, as if sensing their peace, began to subside, the drumming rain softening to a gentle patter. Julian shifted, pulling her closer still, tucking her head into the crook of his shoulder. His arm tightened around her, a possessive, comforting weight. "My love," he whispered, his voice still thick with emotion, his lips brushing her hair. "My beautiful, beautiful love." She sighed, a sound of utter contentment, pressing a kiss to the warm skin of his chest. His heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear, a lullaby of profound intimacy. She felt utterly cherished, utterly seen, utterly loved. The world outside, with its complexities and demands, seemed a million miles away. Here, in the velvet embrace of their bed, with Julian's arms around her, was all the world she needed. Sleep, a sweet, heavy blanket began to descend, but not before she felt Julian's lips press a final, tender kiss to her forehead. "Rest, my heart," he murmured. "We have all the time in the world." She awoke slowly, gently, to the unfamiliar weight of an arm draped across her waist, and the soft, rhythmic sound of a man's breathing. For a moment she was disoriented, then the memories of the night before flooded back, warm and vivid, bringing a blush to her cheeks and a soft smile to her lips. The storm was gone. A gentle, diffused light filtered through the heavy velvet curtains, painting the room in shades of soft gold and rose. She stirred, turning carefully in his embrace to face him. Julian lay on his side, his dark hair tousled, his long lashes resting against his cheek. A faint, contented smile played on his lips even in sleep. He looked utterly peaceful, utterly hers. Her heart swelled with a tenderness so potent it almost brought tears to her eyes. This man, who had stirred such a tempest in her soul, now lay beside her, a haven of peace. She reached out, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, the faint stubble rough beneath her touch. He stirred, a low groan rumbling in his chest, and his eyes slowly fluttered open. For a moment, sleep-hazed, he simply looked at her, his gaze soft, filled with a warmth that made her feel cherished from the inside out. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep, yet holding the familiar timbre that now sent shivers of pleasure through her. He reached up, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft, still heavy with sleep and the lingering magic of the night. "The storm is over." "It seems it is," he agreed, his eyes twinkling. "Both outside and in." He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her lips, a kiss that was both a greeting and a reaffirmation. "Did you sleep well, my love?" "Better than I have in years," she confessed, pressing closer to him, inhaling the intoxicating scent of him, a mix of their shared intimacy, his natural musk, and a faint hint of sandalwood. "And you?" "Perfectly," he said, his smile widening. "Knowing you were beside me." He tightened his arm around her, pulling her flush against her length, their bodies fitting together as if they were made for each other. "I could stay like this forever." The thought sent a wave of warmth through her. Forever. It sounded impossibly hopeful, wonderfully real. Last night had been more than just passion. It had been a profound connection, a merging of souls that felt destined. The tapestry of their story indeed was not just beginning to unfold, but had taken its first exquisite, vibrant threads, weaving them together with strength and beauty. She looked around the opulent room, now bathed in the soft morning light. The heavy velvet curtains, the antique furniture, the flickering fire from last night, now just embers, all of it seemed to hold the echo of their passion, the silent witness to their shared rapture. But it wasn't the setting that mattered, it was the man beside her, the connection that had been forged in the crucible of the storm. "What do you want to do today?" she asked, already knowing his answer, or at least hoping for it. He kissed the top of her head, his chin resting gently there. "Nothing," he murmured. "Nothing at all. But stay right here with you. Perhaps a late breakfast if you're amenable." And then he pulled back slightly, his eyes sparkling with renewed desire. "I think we have more to explore, more chapters to write in our tapestry." Her heart fluttered. More chapters? The thought filled her with a delicious anticipation. This wasn't just a night of passion. It was the dawn of something profound, something lasting. Julian had not just touched her body, he had touched her soul, awakening a part of her she hadn't known was dormant. She tangled her fingers in his hair, pulling him down for another kiss, slow and deep, a silent promise of all the mornings and nights to come. "I like the sound of that," she whispered against his lips. "Very much indeed." As the sun began to climb higher, casting longer, brighter streaks across the room, she nestled deeper into Julian's embrace, content and utterly at peace. The wildness of the storm had given way to the quiet beauty of dawn, and the wildness within them had blossomed into a tender, enduring love. Their tapestry, woven with threads of desire, vulnerability, and profound connection, was indeed a masterpiece in the making, and she couldn't wait to see where its intricate patterns would lead them next. The journey had just begun, and with Julian by her side, she knew it would be the most magnificent adventure of all.